Well, my impression is, based upon the reports I've received from friends on the inside, is that we turned the transponder off that are normally attached to the unmanned vehicle. As a result, we were trying to move in close within the air defense identification zone that belongs to the Russians. Everybody has these. When you move into that ADIZ, you're supposed to acknowledge that you're there, identify yourself. Obviously, we didn't want to do that. So without the transponders, it was trying to be stealthy and gather intelligence on the Crimea installations on Crimea that belong to the Russian military. It didn't work out. And the Russians were within their legal bounds of international law to take it out, which they did. Whether or not they actually did it in the way that's described, I don't know. That sounded suspicious. I haven't heard of planes colliding with other planes to take them down, okay?
Have you heard of planes emptying their fuel on drones? Almost as if to mimic a dog urinating.
No, I haven't heard that either. Quite frankly, I don't know how it happened, but I do know that the Russians disposed of it and it crashed into the sea. And I know why it was there. It was there to collect intelligence, targeting data for installations in Crimea. They also used what I'm told to target the bridge that we tried to destroy.
Is this any different from a Chinese balloon?
Well, it is different in the sense that this is inside the air defense identification zone of Russia. And yes, you're right. The Chinese balloon was inside our air defense identification zone, and we were within our legal rights to shoot it down. Absolutely, that's true. But I think this is not the first time that this has happened. I think the Russians have simply sent a message. We're not going to tolerate it anymore.
How effective? I just estimated 10,000 feet. I mean, do you know how high it was and how effective these drones are at gathering data about Russian military activities in Crimea?
Well, I think they're very effective in terms of collecting data. Whether they're more effective at 10,000 than they are at 5,000 or it makes no difference, I don't know. But I do know that all these unmanned collectors, whether it's Global Hawk or the one that we're talking about, are all excellent and do a great job.
I heard a statement from President Putin the other day, and I heard it translated into English about the relationship between the United States and Germany. I think you know where I'm going. President Putin said Germany is still occupied. He didn't finish the sentence, but I think he obviously meant occupied as it was by the Allied forces after World War I, a historic event with which we're all generally familiar. He was basically mocking the German government for putting up with the American government, telling it, sit down, be quiet, be a good boy, while we destroy your pipeline with Russia.
Yes, I wouldn't quite term the condition of our influence in Germany as equal to occupation. That's over the top. But clearly, Mr. Schultz has behaved as though he were a vassal of the greater American empire. Today, I received an email about a firm in Germany that is involved with metalwork. They make alloys, they build alloys, and they also bend metal and so forth. This firm has been in business since 1380 as a result of the loss of cheap energy. In other words, energy they can afford, which was the natural gas that came out of Russia. This firm, for the first time since 1380, is going out of business. And thousands of people are going to suffer as a result of this. And this is completely unnecessary. This shouldn't have happened. But that's just one more piece of evidence for the stupidity and the folly of destroying the Nord Stream 2. That was a monumental mistake. It's an act of war by the United States against the Germans. I don't think Mr. Schultz and his friends are going to be in government too much longer. I can't predict when, but I think the German people are going to object to this, and they've had enough of it.
Well, they're going to find that guy on the sailboat. It's like the Minnow, the boat that got lost on Gilligan's Island.
I mean...
This is absurd.
Well, actually, I think we have to give Gilligan more credit. He'd have done a better job, at least in creating fiction. Now this is utterly absurd, but this is a CIA. And you're making an important point. If you look at the recent articles that have come out in the New York Times and the Washington Post just within the last 48 hours, we're now beginning to see the truth actually creep into articles about the Ukraine war. And what I'm talking about are the horrific casualties that the Ukrainians are taking, the devastating impact of Russian artillery and Russian rockets and missiles, the terrible conditions for life for the people in Ukraine. It's actually being mentioned now. So that's a good thing.
You recently wrote that well-regarded estimates show that between 150,000 to 200,000 Ukrainians have been killed in action. These are military people killed in action. And you saw another estimate that was as 250,000. How big is their army? How much longer could they tolerate a loss of 200,000 in 12 months?
Well, this is another important question. And I think Ukraine has actually built 3 armies. They had one that we destroyed, or actually the Russians destroyed. Early in the war, I would say between February and July, a second army was configured, equipped, and sent into action after July, and that one was largely destroyed by Christmas. And then a third one was constructed. This is all based on waves of mobilization, inducting people forcibly and otherwise. It's gotten so bad with the manpower shortage in Ukraine that just yesterday, I received reports from people in Odessa that told me they were watching as Ukrainian men of various ages, from 16 up to 50, were being apprehended in cafes and restaurants at Odessa, shoved into trucks and disappearing. Literally. No questions, no discussion. Get on the truck, gun in your face, you're going to the front. And we know from the reports we're getting from Ukrainian soldiers that post these things on the internet that the average life on the front for a new recruit is about what? 3 or 4 hours, because these people have no experience. They may get, if they're lucky, 3 or 4 weeks of training, sometime on a rifle range. That's absurd. So they're getting more and more people killed needlessly.
Colonel, even if they have 3 or 4 weeks of training, if they don't have ammunition in their weapons, the training is moot. They're just a body being sent out there to slaughter.
Well, they are receiving small arms ammunition, maybe not as much as they would like. And of course, if you're in a combat zone, I can tell you from experience, you never have enough ammunition. You've got it piled up all around you. You did the last thing in the world is you don't want to run out of it. The problem for the Ukrainians is they've run out of artillery ammunition. And so they're not giving artillery support to their soldiers. Now you're talking about a war, which the Russians already have a 10-1 advantage in firepower. They're the ones that are the most effective in firepower, their own firepower from artillery systems. Now their own artillery can't fire because they don't have any more 155 shells. When you look at the losses, they range into thousands for howitzers, tanks, and other equipment. The Russians are killing these things as they show up. And a lot of it is done in the following way. A small drone is flown over Ukrainian lines. They discover that there's an artillery system, an air defense system, a radar, then come a different set of drones that literally fly right into those pieces of equipment and disable them. And then if that's not enough, rocket artillery rains down on what's there and kills everyone. So this is a procedure that goes on again and again and again.
Let's talk big picture in a piece you recently published with apologies to Winston Churchill, entitled The Gathering Storm. Great title, Colonel. You actually give a little bit of praise to Secretary of State Tony Blinken, whom you referred to as a rabid supporter of the proxy war. We all know that. But one who recognizes that President Zelensky's insistence that we assist them to recapture the Crimea is A, absurd, and B, as a red line, which would result in disastrous consequences from President Putin.
Right. Well, it's too bad he didn't reach that conclusion many months ago. But we could have said that in January or December of last year and avoided that pointless discussion. The other thing is, I think William Butler Yeats,